Welcome to another figure week, hard surface week, organic week.
Hey everyone, my name is Ahmed Al-Douri. I'm a concept artist and former instructor at Art Center College of Design, Brainstorm, CCS, CGMA, and various other places. And I would like to introduce to you this digital painting course that I've created. But before we get into anything, I just want to thank you for the support you've all given me this whole time. And with the support of so many of you, I've been able to put together everything I know about painting into this digital painting course. You want to become a pro illustrator, concept artist, or even just a hobbyist, but you don't have a clear map to get there. And that's where I come in. I spent the last 6 months compiling everything I know from my 20 years of art practice, and I've turned it all into a map. Starting with foundations such as rendering shapes, color theory, painting basic subjects, understanding brushwork, brush economy, all that fun stuff, deconstructing the skull, drawing it from every angle, all the way to master studies, stylized painting, and you'll find yourself at the end of the course doing a concept art project based on everything that we learn in the first 14 lessons. So how does it work? Well, you sign up, you watch the lectures, do the assignments, post them to the community page if you want, and treat it as a self-study, except for those of you who have signed up for the weekly meeting, where I personally critique your work in a virtual classroom setting. I believe learning by repetition is super important. That's what I've sort of presented a lot in this course, and the assignments are tailored for that, as adapted from my time teaching at Art Center. And each of these lessons have step-by-step explanations in real time. If you've ever seen my videos, you know exactly how I teach. And this course is intended to be a substitute for a college level course, but you don't have to pay the $4,000 or $5,000 per class, racking up maybe $200K in debt. With my custom design course, you'd be paying a fraction of that. And of course, I also have payment plan options if you don't want to pay for the whole thing at once. Thank you for watching this, and I'll see you soon.
Hey guys, and welcome back to Digital Artcast. Thanks again for dropping in for another episode. I hope you guys, wherever you are in the world, are all staying safe and keeping on with some creative projects to keep your mind occupied. Another interview coming in with an amazing guest, someone again we've wanted to go on for a while, and just kind of persistence was key here, and bothering him every 2 minutes just to make sure that he was making sure I still wanted him on the podcast and he was still available, but we finally got him in here. And I'm glad to say that he's willing to talk about art and all things that he's done in the past. Here today, can everybody please help me welcome along Esben Rasmussen. Hey Esben, how's it going, bud?
Hey man, how you going? Nice to be here.
Yeah, thanks for coming on. So for anybody who doesn't know you at this point, I'm sure there's a few of them out there, but for anybody who doesn't, can you give a quick intro to who you are and what you do?
Sure. My name is Esben Rasmussen. I also go under Esben Lash, and I've been working in the video game industry for almost 10 years now as an illustrator, and that's kind of like been my main thing. Just creating worlds, characters, and everything that's kind of connected to that, and telling stories and communicating emotions.
Yeah.
So that's me.
Yeah. I mean, definitely, your work already speaks for itself, and the fact that it's kind of seen through far beyond all the corners of the art world. Like, people have probably maybe never even known who you were specifically, but they'll see your art and go, "Oh yeah, like I know where that's came from." So, um, so for you getting started in art, was this a traditional path you went on? Did you start with the simple stuff like going to school for it, then getting educated yourself? Did you self-learn, self-teach? What was your kind of path early on?
The path was a little bit messy because working in the video game industry back then, it wasn't as clear of a job as it is now.
Right.
So I was figuring it out while I was kind of growing up too. So I thought I was going to be a 3D modeler.
Oh.
So I started going the 3D modeling route.
Yep.
And then halfway in, I found out that there's this education called the Animation Workshop, and they had a computer graphic artist, which is a 3D generalist education.
Cool.
So I took that path, and then 1 year in, I found out that you can do concept art and you can do illustration, and I decided to do a 180 and then go that direction, and then let a bit of my grip go with the 3D modeling, and then I started to focus on that, and then I went to Newcastle in the UK,
Oh, wow.
where I got my first internship, and then I went and got my second internship in Berlin at Six More Vodka,
Nice.
and then that became the first job.
Mm-hmm.
And then after that, I helped start what's it called, art studio in Copenhagen.
Oh, cool.
And then I was scooped up by Riot after that, and
Yep.
yeah, so it was a ride. It was a ride.
I could imagine,
So it's-
especially in 10 years, like it's, and even talking about Six More Vodka, I mean, one of the most prestigious art studios, art houses, I would say, in the whole of Europe. I mean, you know, the caliber of stuff that comes out there is always mind blown. Like every artist who worked for them, every time they post something, I'm like, my God, like just how are you doing it? And I know there's more places like that popping up now, but like, yeah, definitely. It was funny to hear also that you went to Newcastle for your first internship. Was that by any chance Ubisoft, or was that a smaller studio? Was that even maybe Atom Hawk?
that was Adam Hawk. Yeah,
You
that
thought it
Adam
was?
Hawk.
Yeah. One or the other, but yeah, Atom Hawk's all great bros as well. Met a couple of them a few times down at the industry workshop stuff and down in London. Really great guys. But yeah, I mean, concept is like you said, even back then, 10 years ago. I mean, when I left my job as an engineer in 2011, 2012, like, ArtStation wasn't a thing. There was no online learning, nothing to say apart from maybe CG Hub or something. And yeah, like it was funny. Now we talk about this kind of often on the podcast, but the first guy I emailed back in 2008, 2009 about concept art, Matt Gazer, who was working in the US at the time, has now hired me for his company. So like 10-year span. Yeah, me going through college, university, and like, how are you getting on? I'm like, oh, I'm fine. And then it comes to me one day, like, oh, do you want a job? I'm like, yeah, okay. So,
Absolutely.
but yeah, 3D is one of these things as well. I've kind of started with, and I had this conversation the other day with Marek Magie, shout out Marek, and Marek was talking to one of his students about how concept art now is almost as difficult as like trying to land a role as an actor, like a mainline actor in a role in a film. Do you feel that concept art's gotten to that point now? Do you think it's so saturated that it is an extremely hard dream to accomplish? Do you feel like the way the whole industry shifted in the last 10 years, that it's one of the hardest jobs to get now?
I think it's definitely hard. I think it's let me rephrase that. I think it's harder than it
Mm-hmm.
was when we were starting out. I do
Right.
think that it goes with several factors. It goes also with that there are also more positions that have opened up since we started out.
Mm-hmm.
So that means that yes, it's harder to land the role, but there's also more roles available, so that kind
Yep.
of equals it out a little bit. But I think that the main factor, as I see it, is that competition has vastly grown,
Mm-hmm.
which is that with the rise of the internet and everything, you can now hire people from anywhere, and the whole world is entering, the arena.
Yep.
It was so before too, but right now it's way more than before. So you
Yep.
can compete with somebody who's sitting in Vietnam or anywhere in the world.
Yeah.
And what really comes down to it is, how much you've been able to push yourself, what you're able to do with the art. So it's tricky.
Yeah.
It's also tricky because the information is way more available. Like there are great, online courses and YouTube tutorials
Mm.
and Instagrams that are sharing and knowledge, and since it's way more readily available,
Mhm.
it'll be easier for more people to pick up. So
To
that
start.
also,
Yeah.
yeah, it also touches upon the competition of that. So I think, I think that more than ever, for new artists starting out or for artists wanting to break into the industry, is
Mm.
to bring something that is uniquely theirs or original to the table, while also carrying a strong fundamental skills.
Mhm.
So it's a hard nut to crack.
Yeah, it's not an easy path. I can definitely tell you for the few years I've been doing it, I've definitely struggled, and I was lucky Matt came along when he did. But yeah, the competition, even in 3D, like the programs, even stuff like Blender now being free, it just opens the gates to everybody, who wants to pick up a mouse and a keyboard and start learning this stuff. So the same with the 2D stuff, because back in the day, Wacom tablets were a fortune, and like only a few people had them, and now it's one of these things where you can buy a basic one for like $40 or something, like, and as long as you have a reasonable computer, you can run Photoshop or other stuff. And now we were talking about the iPad before, with Procreate being on the scene. I mean, that's a whole other just landscape of stuff that is now free and available. And the fact that you can buy now Procreate, I think for $10, and for its entire lifetime, it's free updates and stuff. So, and people doing professional work on it now. Like, it wasn't even when it started, I think 2016 was when I first started learning about it, but now I know people like Antonio Staparts, who runs Artwad, like he is working completely freelance on the iPad. Like, he doesn't really touch Photoshop anymore. So it's a whole other game now, of availability. So yeah, are you doing anything iPad wise now? Are you still kind of mainly just Photoshop and Cintiqs and Wacoms,
No,
or?
I do iPads too. I've been working with Procreate, Clip Studio Paint, and also a bit of Nomad.
Oh, wow.
So I've been messing around with the iPad. It's kind of like my go-to. I snuggle up in bed and put on a show, and then I
Just throw
sit,
away.
and yeah, sit and do a drawing or a sketch or something like that,
Yeah.
or like some 3D.
Well, it's good to get
Uh,
away from the computer as well, because you know yourself, sitting at a desk for so many hours, like, it does nothing good for you, really, for your back, for your posture, for your health. Um,
exactly.
I can imagine. Was that the kind of setup you had, kind of like in most studios, where you just mostly just at a desk, Photoshop, Wacom, or whatever? Was kind of the go to.
Yeah, it was the
Yeah,
go-to. And
yeah.
then when the iPad started to come in and Procreate started to really improve the how do you say it, drawing on a tablet
Right. Yeah.
and making that natural, then things started to pick up, and I started to do thumbnailing and
Mm-hmm.
sketching and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
And I mainly still do that for the
Mm-hmm.
for the creative process.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but it is possible to do a drawing and a painting on an iPad. I just prefer at that point to switch over to a
The
desktop. But
Photoshop.
I've been
Yeah.
working with a desktop setup for a long time.
Long
So
time. It's hard. It is. Yeah. I mean, I think people who start on the iPad and that's their whole initial entry into the world, it's easier for that than to be full time, as opposed to people who have, like you said, they're so comfortable in Photoshop with the shortcuts, with the keys, with the layout. It's just like a second home. So yeah. I mean, would you say there was a big change from you when you went from somewhere like Six More Vodka to Riot, like even just the whole European side of it, to America? Was there a big jump in attitude towards art directors and the way you produced art, or was it kind of the same thing but a different place?
it was a vastly different place.
Hmm.
Yeah. Well, I would say in Six More it was a lot more strict. It was a lot more clear direction, in the
Hmm.
sense of, like, you had no idea, or you had no, how do you say, doubt
Hmm.
of what you needed to do.
Right.
So it was very, like, efficient. It was very, like, clear communication in terms of, like, what you needed to do,
Hmm.
what was expected from you,
Hmm.
the quality and everything.
Hmm.
Where in LA, it was a lot more kind of like, feeling based and kind of like it's less defined and all that, and it's like, oh, okay, and so that was a little hard to just switch over and learn what that meant, and also sometimes what isn't being said in between the words.
Right.
So it was definitely very different. I definitely felt a little bit like how do you say, like a kung fu kid or something that comes to a place where because it's like at Six More, it was highly efficient, and we were working working really really well, I would say. Like we were being super optimized.
Right.
And then when I then come to LA, it's very different. So it's like all of a sudden I've been like, I've been standing and practicing on hitting this tree, and all of a sudden, you get a piece of cardboard, and you're like, oh, okay, so that was different, and I think I missed a little bit of that sort of clear direction, and I guess a little bit more very hierarchy kind of based direction. I missed that in the early start for sure, but there are benefits to both ways of running a company like that. It just depends on which one you wanna get, and you're also giving some up, so it's a balance.
I can imagine, yeah. I mean, I definitely have heard the same from people who have came from more like the battle-hardened center of Europe towards, Los Angeles and the way life is out there. I mean, I was lucky enough to get to visit it in 2019. I went to Riot to catch one of my buddies there, and the whole place, Riot, it feels like a kind of university campus, like the whole way it's laid out, and the center court thing, and the basketball shooting, and the free lunches, and the vending machines, and definitely a way I would look at that stuff that says that's an American way of running an office, as opposed to the guys at Six More Vodka or even the European stuff across here. But yeah, like I do understand what you're saying with that. Is that kind of part of the reason why you're back in Europe now? Is that kind of the reason why you came back towards here? Like you felt like you wanted to do something differently artistically?
There's definitely part of that. There was many conversations back and forth with Riot and I in terms of figuring out something and continue our working relationship. And the main thing for me was really family.
Right.
So I wanted to be closer to my family. I wanted to start a family eventually in Denmark. I could not see myself do that in LA.
Yeah.
LA is a great place, and I had some amazing years there. And I considered, settling there or in the nearby area.
Right.
But I just, in the end, I couldn't see it. I couldn't see myself in the American system. So I uprooted and went back to Denmark. And then there's been I'm finishing up a contract with Riot right now, and now I'm then moving on to my first sort of steps after almost, I think it's 6-7 years with Riot now.
Wow.
So I'm
Letting
saying
loose.
bye to Riot for now, and maybe we'll see each other again in the future.
Yeah.
But I have said yes to an art director role on an unannounced project
Cool.
for IO Interactive
Very good.
in Copenhagen. So
Nice. Yeah, the guys at IO are awesome. I've definitely enjoyed their work on the Hitman series for a long time. Like I've been a big fan for many, many years. So yeah, it's a great studio. So congrats on that. Well done. So you heard it here first, guys. Inside scoop. Yeah.
And I didn't care much for Hitman. Like Hitman was never my type of game.
Right.
So that was one of the requirements too. That if it is, then it couldn't be Hitman, because then I just wouldn't be up for it. But but I'm excited for this new adventure and to see that what happens next.
Yeah, that's awesome, man. Great, congrats. I mean, like, I think it's one of these things, when you look at America and how it's structured, and the things, I think when I grew up in the world of, games, America was the bastion. It was the place you looked to because, all the studios were there. It's kind of where it launched. Although even funny enough, where like Japan played such a huge role for many years, like, but then everybody kind of looked to the West. But, Blizzard was early on the scene, and EA and stuff like that. And it was very apparent, that it was the place to go if you wanted to work in games. But I think now, looking at European studios, there is such a huge, huge, I mean, I couldn't name them all, but there's so many studios across in the European continent now. I mean, even the other day I was talking to my buddies from Massive in Malmo, and like, my God, the stuff they're doing, their new studio, like, the whole idea that they're now working on a Star Wars franchise, like, it's so crazy. And of course, like here in the UK, like even just 10 minutes down the road from me in Edinburgh, you've got Rockstar North who launched Grand Theft Auto. So I mean, like, people always talk about that and think that's made in America, but it's over here. So and even talking to some of my buddies early on when they were working in Red Dead, I mean, there's such a culture in Europe of making games, and I think also it's the benefit stuff that I talk about now with my friends in LA, which is like healthcare, schools, systems like that. It's stuff you think about, like, oh yeah, if I'm going to have a family, then yeah, that maybe would be slightly better over here. So because you're not the first writer I've talked to who's left recently and came back to the motherland. So it's definitely a thing I think people are kind of finding now, is especially during the pandemic, and a lot of people, their priorities shifted because the world kind of went to shit. So
Yeah, and I know, like, as shit and everything as the pandemic has been too, there has been good things, I think, that came with it, and I think part of that was, like, being able to stop up, kind of look at your life and kind of like reassess and everything, and be like, okay, where do I want to make some changes?
Yep.
So, and that was the big change for me, was like, okay,
yeah,
back to Europe, and I have not regretted it. It's been amazing.
Apart from the weather, maybe.
Actually, I think that's been the best part.
Oh, cool.
It sounds weird, but it was a conundrum that I did not expect, but which was having 25 degrees, sunshine pretty much every day doesn't sound too bad, and it's not bad. But I didn't expect that time starts flowing together. Like, it becomes kind of like Groundhog Day, because you wake up, it's the same day. You wake up, it's the same day, and that's a year. And I didn't like that. I didn't like that. I didn't have the seasons to remind me. I didn't have that I wake up, it's sunshine. Oh, it's wonderful. You can always go out, which is wonderful when you got the time. You can, but if you have to sit and work from 9 to 6 or 9 to 5, anyways, you're inside and you just look at the window outside and it's sunshine, and you're like, I do not want to sit here and paint. So coming back to the gray and the rain, it's been amazing. Like, you hear that in the background, and you can sit down in front of your screen and you'll be like, okay, let's do this.
There's people in America who put the rain sounds on their monitors because they won't actually hear what rain sounds like, and we've got it like literally outside. So yeah, I know all too good about that being in Scotland. We definitely have our fair share of bloody rain, but I mean, like, it's one of these things. I think when you look at the beauty and the natural wonder of Europe, like in some of the places, I mean, even in Copenhagen, like in Denmark, it's somewhere I've never been, but I'd love to go. I mean, the place looks beautiful, and people say the same when they look in Scotland, like, oh my God, the mountains, the hills, but it's lost on people, I think, when you live here all your life. But then you kind of, it's weird because my partner's Dutch, so she's from Netherlands, and Scotland's always been her dream home, and I'm kind of like, why? But then when you see it through her eyes, you're like, right, I get it. Like, you understand. So yeah. So
sometimes you need to go away in order to appreciate what you have at home. You see it with new light.
Yeah, definitely. I can imagine. So how has that changed your artistic approach being home in Denmark then? Has anything changed from your day-to-day routine? Is it are you approaching your work differently, or how you paint, or like when you paint?
I mean, I control when I paint. So right now, well, that's about to change because I'm taking on a full-time art director role, right? So that's going to be bound to the policies of
the office hours and stuff. Yeah.
But right now I control my own hours. So if I want to go and go to the gym, hang out with my friends, I do that, and then I can work in the evening. So I have flexible hours, and I'm loving it. It's wonderful. As long as I get my work done, then I don't really care how many or when I work. It's just like, I need to make sure that the hours that I put in are very efficient, and
Mhm.
that's sort of it. And then I make some leeway. So I'm
Yeah.
loving it right now. It's really wonderful. I hope I won't miss it too much.
No, I know it's one of these things where it's. I'm very lucky with the art director I have right now, where he is, the same mindset of, as long as your stuff's done, work when you need to, take time, go away, walk, do what you need to do. Stuck to your desk for 8 hours a day. However you want to break that 8 hours up is up to you. And that's what kind of scares me is if I ever had to go back into a position where I was in a studio again, like, then you're bound again for your 9 to 5 or 8 till 6 or whatever it is. You kind of lose that freedom, and it does feel a bit weird going back into that mode of working non-stop and only lifting your head every 5 minutes to look up at your screen. It's a bit scary, but it's also great as well because I know people who have also taken on roles, across in America and LA and stuff like that. One of the guys I know who just started working for Respawn, and he's there in England working. So that's a whole thing where he can now live down there but work for them over in LA. So it's a whole thing where remote working's a sense that if you're up for it and that's what you want to do, it's a total option now. Whereas before, you had to be somewhere. You had to be either in an office, in a cubicle, or like even when you started Ram Hawk, right, you would be in the office for so many hours per day, and same every other company you'd be there. But now with remote working, people can kind of be their own bosses and stuff, and it seems a great freedom, but there's a penalty there as well because you have to be strict with your time, right? You have to, like you said, you've got to be efficient, so you may have to make sure that you're not just wasting too much time doing one thing. You have to make sure that like you're taking chunks of work and you're getting it done. So yeah, I can totally understand how that's going to be a thing where you're going to miss that when it's gone. But then, of course, do you find that like the structure is something you crave sometimes, or like, well, I mean, it's different now, right? Because you've had so much of that, so now you're enjoying the freedom. Then you're going back to that. Will that be something too scary or too unfamiliar?
No, it should be fine. I think it's a balance, right? It's a
Mm-hmm.
balance, like you say. It's like I always like the analogy of like if you have total freedom, right? It's kind of like a pool of water that just becomes stale and still.
Oh yeah.
But in order for it to have a direction and a path, you sometimes need boundaries that can kind of guide
Yep.
that water. So boundaries are super helpful, super
Yep.
important, and really necessary often
Yeah.
to get stuff done. So too much freedom is never good, and too much boundaries is not never good either. So it's a fine balance.
Yes, agreed. Yeah, especially when I was kind of booted out of university and like, like, oh, you've graduated now, fantastic, fly. Like you're kind of sitting there like, okay, well, what do I do now? Like, how
Yeah.
do I structure my day? Do I get up at this time? Do I work for this many hours? And I mean, it's the most common thing you'll get at every conference you go to, or every second question you'll get is like, Esben, how many hours a day do you draw? How many? Tell me exactly. And you're like, well, I mean, some days it's 3, some days it's 5. I don't know. Like, it's like you've got to be the master of your own time. It's so hard, I think, within this industry, freelance or office work. You've kind of got to be, because even people who want to come out of the office work and then do personal work, you've got to be disciplined to do that as well. Because then you will just come home and be like, oh, I can't be bothered doing anything. Just sit and watch the TV or eat some crap or go out. But the people I know who are super dedicated in their personal stuff, like they come home and it's like, right, great, I've got 3 hours. Let's get to it. Let's do whatever we're going to do. Are you finding work, like with what you're doing just now, are you finding time for personal work? Is there anything you're doing outside of your stuff for Riot?
Yeah, yeah. I am at the moment. I am currently working on an illustration for Huion. I'm
Cool.
testing one of their tablets, so I'm seeing how much I can crank out of it. I'll see if see how I like it compared to working, with Wacom. And so far,
Hmm.
it's killing. So far, it's really doing a great job. So
Good.
I'm doing that on the side, and then I am working on making a mini course for how to draw faces from imagination.
All
So
right.
I'm working on that on the side too.
Hmm.
Then I still make sketches for the Instagram and all like that. So
Yeah.
there's some things, and then I try to keep my overall health and stuff like that well.
Yeah. Yeah.
So a
I
little
mean,
bit.
is that like, would you say that's almost, and I mean, it's something I've struggled with my whole life. I've been kind of big my whole life and struggled with it, and it's something that I've carried on. I mean, I was lucky in my previous career as an engineer, I was very physically active. So the weight was kind of kept to management with that because my job was so physically demanding. But now, obviously, sitting in front of a computer, total opposite, right? So do you think that's almost I know what you're going to say anyway, but for our viewers, that your health is almost the main component in your artist journey, that you need to have a healthy body, healthy mind kind of thing?
Yeah, it's alpha omega. It really
Hmm.
is. it goes up and down. Like there are things that life throws at you that will send you for for a curveball, like
Yep.
injuries or mental health or
Mm-hmm.
whatever. And like I've gone through depression, I think
Mm-hmm.
2 or 3 times now. I had to
Same.
take medical leave when I was at Riot.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, those are just things that comes,
Yeah.
and everybody gets hit by it,
Mm-hmm.
and there's no shame in it. And I think the best thing to do, and when you find yourself in that sort of place, is that you can be vocal about it and acknowledge that it's there, and then start to see what sort of changes you can make in order
Mm-hmm.
to give yourself the best odds of that, so
Yeah.
so I would say working out or doing some sort of activity definitely helps just my general mood. Like,
Mm-hmm.
I feel better. I'm a lazy fuck. Like, I I am. It's so hard to go to the gym sometimes, but
Yeah.
once I'm done and all that,
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
love it. It's like it's such a gift. It's such a treat. So
Yeah.
right now, I'm trying to get it in early in the day
Mm-hmm.
so that I don't have to worry about it, because I know that the longer I go,
Mm-hmm.
the more impossible it becomes for me to go to the gym. And
Mm-hmm.
it's so stupid, but even if it's like 4 or 8 or
Mm-hmm.
something like that, I'm very good at tricking myself.
Yeah, I mean it's definitely one of these things. I mean, I can speak from experience definitely where I know my weight has definitely, made my mental health suffer. There's definitely even some physical stuff that's happened because of, my weight and stuff, and it's difficult as well because I'm the same as you. I've definitely suffered with depression and anxiety, and I think it's just the way I've grew up in the world and the birth of the internet. The age of information where like everything all the time, and it's like you can't escape from it. And I feel now as my career goes on, I'm definitely shutting off from it more and more. I'm trying to put social media away. I don't even look at my phone. And I used to, first thing when I woke up, I'd look at my phone, check my messages or notifications, and it's just so toxic. And I think, no like death to America or anything, but like, the guys across there definitely have a culture like that where a lot of the guys are very public on social media. It's a very big part of their day, especially in Los Angeles, right? I mean, outside of the entertainment industry for games, the film industry is there as well. So I mean, it's full of a town full of guys who are trying to make it, try to be in the public eye constantly. And do you feel like that was a proponent to your mental health? Was the fact that you were in Los Angeles, was that making it worse? Do you think?
I think I definitely think that environment affects us as people. There's just
Mm-hmm. Of
no way we go out of it. So your
course.
environment also is affecting you. So there are some things that you have within your own control, but then there are also things that is out of your control.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's, for me, it's neither or. But I would say definitely when I was in LA, of
Mm-hmm.
course LA was affecting me. Like
Yeah.
there's no doubt. Like
Mm-hmm.
and LA is it's a hard place where a lot of people are trying to survive the best they can. They're trying to hustle. They're trying to make it. Because if you ever lived in LA or been in LA, it's just that sort of environment. And it's not the people's fault or anything. It's LA is just a hard city to try to make it in.
Mm-hmm.
It's constantly bossing, so that means that like there's the sound of the cars and everything kind of
Mm-hmm.
around you at all times. There's a lot of people, so there's a lot of life and energy to
Mm-hmm.
it, but depending, that can also make it hard to relax.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, I come from a little village outside in the middle of nowhere in Denmark. We got
Right.
cows, horses, all that sort of stuff,
Mm-hmm.
and it's a good environment to sit down, kind of just focus and draw, because you're fucking bored and there's nothing else to do. That's how it was growing up.
I feel your
Um,
pain. Yeah.
yeah. So for me, coming to LA was a shock to the system in many ways,
Mm-hmm.
both a culture shock, but it was also in terms of the environment.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things that was really important for me when I lived in LA was going hiking. Um, I think if I didn't have that, I think I would have gone down some very dark paths and some very dark roads.
Yep.
Simply because I would try to find a sense of calm and relaxation other ways.
Right.
So I think, for me in LA, hikes and all that was really a lifesaver.
Yeah.
And then at the end of it, of course, I had to relocate, and I did it. And coming back, it was kind of like a huge weight kind of being lifted and sense of relief. So yeah, I think environment is definitely a factor.
I mean, people will talk about, and I've tried my best, obviously, like I said, to not talk about Riot too much, but then it is one of these things where for a lot of people, that is a huge goal, right? That's like the dream. People are like, oh my God, I'd give anything to work at Riot, like, or Blizzard or any of those big companies. But then it's a lot of pressure, right? I mean, especially if you go in too early or you feel like you're not prepared enough. You're working, next day might be two of the biggest artists in the world that are sitting, a desk apart, and you're trying to obviously keep up with them. They maybe try to keep up with you also, and then you try to keep up with deadlines and new things coming out every other day, and it's a big deal. Like, I mean, I've spoken about it publicly as well, and I think that's why people talk about me in a good and bad light, where I'm so transparent, right? I mean, I've lay on my back in my office at one point and stared at the ceiling and took a picture and be like, what am I doing in my life? Like, I've been in those positions, but I've also 6 months ago posted like, oh my God, I just got a job with a studio in LA. This is crazy. So the ups and downs are everywhere, but they're so extreme, right? Like the lows are like ridiculous, like dragging on the floor lows, and the highs are like stratosphere stuff. Like, oh my God, I can't believe it. I mean, how do you, especially as a professional artist for the last 10 years, how have you balanced that? I mean, you've talked about the exercise and stuff like that, but is there a mental game going on constantly with you as well when you're drawing and painting?
I think there's a little bit. There's a little bit of that. I see it a lot like I see it a lot like being an athlete. And I mean, I'm not trying to say that as a grandiose way of being an artist, because I don't think it is, but it's the sense of you are performing, and and the higher you go up in the game, the higher expectations, the more pressure you're working under. So if you're trying to go into the Olympic Games or something, there's a high amount of pressure, and it breaks some athletes. But that's that's the thing. If you're an athlete, that's what you sign up for, and if you want to work those places, you're also signing up for higher pressure, than that you can find other places. So it's both part of the artists themselves to kind of find a way to balance that and to work under that pressure, and find ways to alleviate and relax again and kind of reset, which can be really hard. But it's a shared thing, because it's not only the artists. I'm not trying to say that it's only the artist
Of
like
course, yeah.
attitude. It's like there are also places where the pressure becomes too much, or a leader is causing suffering on a team or whatever. There's many scenarios that can happen.
Yeah.
But I would say Riot was all in all pretty good. There's high pressure, but I also felt there were moments where we could then take a briefer and kind of reset. So
Yep.
it was fine. But I try to, the best advice I can say is like, see it as that there's several amounts of pressure that you're gonna pressure situations that you're going to be in throughout your career. So it's also finding one that fits to one's personality and goals and everything. And I think the worst thing is that if you feel like you're being under a huge amount of pressure, but the work or whatever is not meaningful to you, that can be hard, because then you're under a huge amount of pressure, but you don't feel that what you're doing is the right path, or it's pushing in the right direction. And then that makes it hard to endure. So making sure that if you're under high pressure, something like that, that it's helping you in your journey, I think is the most important part. So having that meaning behind is so important.
Yeah, we've talked about it, especially when it comes to, personal projects and people getting involved and stuff like that. The fact that, if the passion is lacking, it is definitely something that's going to hinder you, because when you're pushing maybe 20 hours on a project, or you've been 20 hours in one day sometimes. I mean, it depends how some studios work, but yeah, I mean, it really can be a point where the balance goes out of whack and you're left there feeling a bit burnt out. And I mean, burnout is it's terrible, man. I mean, there's sometimes it can take people, I know, have taken years to recover, like literally years, because it's just they have a disgust for art, or like, they feel like they're done with it and they want to throw it aside. And I was almost at that point until I got my job. And, the fact that it sounded stupid, but I had this whole conversation with one of my friends about, she's also a 3D artist, but when I got my first paycheck, and I had money in the bank and I could pay my bills and I could eat and I could go buy something I wanted, like, it reinvigorated me. And, I even had this discussion with Carlo Ortiz about how artists can almost not really function unless they feel like they're, if you're constantly in that fight or flight mode of like, how am I going to pay my bills? How am I going to make money? You can't really be creative in a sense because you have so much worry on your mind. And it is a thing where, it's one of these things where people struggle to think about, oh, well, I have to, struggle or grind for so many years without pay, without compensation, and how am I going to do it? And it's hard, man. Like, I've not got the answers. I can't really tell students now that come to me and ask, I can't say, well, you're going to have to work for free for a long time, because sometimes that's just the harsh reality that you're going to have to grind for a few years before you get any kind of semblance of a paycheck. And I've seen people quit over it. I've seen people just leave. And I mean, out of my university, I mean, there's maybe only 3 or 4 people working out of like 40 students, and it's the way the industry is. It's the same with illustration, right? Like, it's just, especially like you say now, because the bar is so high, it's hard for kids or just young students or people coming in at the door and looking at what they've got to achieve and where they start and thinking, holy shit, that's some gap. Like, how am I going to fill that? And sitting down every day for 8 hours to draw is difficult when there's no motivation of reward or pay or any kind of compensation, right? I mean, you went through that right early on. Like, you were a student at one point. It was difficult. So
Yeah, and I feel you, man. Like, that's so hard. It depends on the individual too, and what their goals are, because it's not just wanting to be an artist. It's also like, like, what's the goals for family life, like all these sort of things. Because if you want to be, let's say you want to be a working professional artist and you want to have some sort of home or apartment at the age of 25 and then start thinking about kids at that point, it's like, man, it puts so much pressure underneath your ass, right? Where you're like, fuck, I need to make a certain amount in order to make that shit come true.
yeah.
And I'm trying to go into this industry that is hard and is highly competitive. And and I agree with you what you said. There are some situations where you have so much pressure that it's hard to be creative, and I think that's true. I think that if you're in a situation where you're like, I need to make money in order for this to run around, I think that you do not make your best work in those periods of time, because I truly believe that good work comes from a place of inner peace, if you can say that. Like, but it comes from a place of like, you're not rushing it, you're doing it because you love it, you're taking the time. And often when we have, future expectations, or we want to be somewhere else than where we are, and we put that in the work and in the situation, it just doesn't come out as well, because we're trying to rush to a place. And I've been there too. I'm not saying that it's wrong to be there. I'm just saying that it's not where you make your best work. So
yeah.
It's really tricky. I think when I went into becoming an artist, I knew that there were going to be a lot of sacrifices, and that I would have to pause a few things until I was going to be older, and that was okay with me. And then I just tried to focus as much as I could in terms of career, and then just hunker down and really push through and try to say goodbye to my early 20s.
I mean, yeah, I mean, like, it's going to help, obviously. I mean, it's no secret, right, that Riot pays like the highest in the whole industry. Like, their wages are astronomical. But also, you're living in LA, so that also balances out, right? But yeah, like, it's one of these things where it's difficult to see the light at the end of the tunnel, I think, and think to yourself, I've only got so many years to go. But like, the family, the whole traditional setup, it is difficult for most guys I know who have either chosen like they're not going to have a family because like it's just never going to happen, or like they're going to have to make some sacrifices because they want it to happen. And I think at this point, what's harder for me now is because I kind of entered the ring at like, you know, my early 30s. You know, I was then on the opposite track for you, right? I'm heading towards 40. Like that's my next goal. So I'm thinking to myself, right, you know, illustration would be cool, concept would be cool, but like how much time do I really have to dedicate to that, and how much of a work-life balance do I want? And, you know, 3D is great in the sense that, you know, it's no, you know, I always try to walk this fine balance when I talk to students about it, and the fact that 3D hard surface is not easy. It still is as demanding as any other discipline. But the difference between becoming a 3D hard surface artist and like a full-time, you know, splash artist illustrator, I feel like there is a gap. There's definitely like way more you have to learn before, you know, like, because with 3D, a lot of the programs will do some of the work for you. Like a part of it will be calculated with the computer, as opposed to drawing. If you want to draw a person, you're going to need to know anatomy, you know, very well, structure the hands, jaws, teeth, eyes, hair, you know, like that's all stuff that really needs to be ingrained in your psyche before you even put pen to paper. And, you know, and then you're talking about like splash art, right? Well, cool. Then you also need to know how to paint and mix paints and color theory. And, you know, a lot of that stuff I think goes above and beyond. So, you know, the sacrifice that I'm now making is like, well, not that I'm kind of settling for 3D, but like at this point, I'm still involved in the industry. I'm still getting to be creative. I'm still taking that leap out of my old career into a new one. So that's enough for me. Like I'm just trying to be at peace with being happy with my choice and being happy with the fact that I'm earning money, I'm getting to work in games. It's enough. You know what I mean? And I think it's the same for you now, right? Like Riot was great. It was like you said, you're an athlete, you're running that marathon for so long, but now you're thinking, right, you know, time to slow down just a little bit, like take a bit of my life back, find a bit of balance, right? And I'm assuming that's what you're kind of where you are just now.
Yeah, for sure. That's definitely, and I love that too. I think that's, if I can speak to a lot of the artists and a lot of the students out there that, you know, like they're looking towards, you know, like splash art or something like that, and they're like, you know, that's the goal. You know, like
Mm-hmm.
if I do not make that, I'm a fucking failure. I'm like, slow down, slow down. It's like
Yeah.
it's good to have high ambitions, and it's good to have these things.
Right.
I think I think the problem that I sometimes have with it is, I think it's a better and more healthy way to be like, hey, I'm a illustrator, or I'm an artist, and I like to illustrate, you know, these things. And if I fit in to a splash situation, and I come to reach a point where I am interested for that team,
Mm-hmm.
and, you know, then awesome, I will do it. You know, like,
Mm-hmm.
go for it. But I think sometimes too, when you only have identified with one thing, you become blind to all the other good things that are there.
Yep.
And that's the thing with sometimes with young artists, and when they're like, oh, Riot or Blizzard, it's like, yeah, Riot and Blizzards are really cool, some
Mm-hmm.
cool good places to work. No shade there.
Mm-hmm.
But you have to remember too that there's so many other cool things that are happening, and
Yeah. Of
you cannot close yourself to all of that stuff either. And you
course.
can learn some things there that you cannot learn in those big studios.
Yep.
And maybe that's what you need. And then, as you also say, you know, like, as you get older too, your priorities change and
Mm-hmm.
your values change, and you're like, okay, well, maybe I'm not willing to sacrifice everything for my career. Like,
Yeah.
hey, am I really willing to like, for me, I'm not willing to sacrifice the opportunity of starting a family for a career.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
Yeah.
as wonderful as having a good career and everything can be,
Mm-hmm.
um, there is no doubt in my mind that a family for me
Mm-hmm.
carries more value.
Yep.
And it's too big of a sacrifice to give up on. So I'm
Yeah.
like, I'm okay with making a bit of compromise
Mm-hmm.
on my career,
Mm-hmm.
in order to be more fulfilled on another end. So it's a constant balance.
Yes. Some would say, I know people who have had kids who are artists will say that their greatest work of art was their kids. So, I mean, it's one of these things, it's one, because I think even for me, like one of the things I feared most of my life was death and not being here at one point. And, we talked about, I obviously wanted to leave a legacy behind. I think this podcast is part of it. But, my partner always explained to me, well, your kids, are the greatest legacy you'll ever leave. Those are the people who will carry on your teachings and things that you've done. That's how it used to work in the old world. It's how it works now. And I kind of came with that assumption, like, oh yeah, you're right, what you're saying. Like, yeah, that is a thing that, because, you know, kids for me were a financial drain, were responsibility on top of everything I was doing just now, where I've also got my career to juggle, and I'm so far at the beginning of it. And yeah, like you said, you miss a lot of stuff. Even the fact we were talking about, like, you work in IO now, you know, like, you know, there's some guys who would be illustrators starting out and be like, oh, you know, IO, you know, it's not Riot, it's not Blizzard, it's not whatever, but still a great studio, still an amazing place to work, you know. And even the place I'm working now, it's not, you know, although it's a small studio, you know, it's not something that's been established for 30, 40 years. It's a smaller take. It's only 5 or 6 of us, but I love what I do and I get well compensated for it. So I'm happy. And that's better, you know, where I was at the start of the pandemic, where I was jobless, you know, penniless, you know, prospectless, and struggling to get up in the morning to do stuff. And yeah, like it's one of all these things you talk about is balance, right? It's trying to find your balance again in the world. So, and like you said, family's part of that. So
Definitely. There is this I had a teacher back in school I called Peter Chan, and he taught me this thing that I always liked. But he said it's the four stove conundrum, I guess, is what we can call it.
okay.
So essentially, imagine there being 4 stoves. So we have a stove, you know, just like when you're cooking. So
Yeah.
you have 4 of them, and the thing is, you can leave all 4 on, but if you leave all 4 on, you can only heat them up to about 80% heat, right?
Right.
So if you leave all 4 on, you know, all of them run at around 80%. So, you know, they will never reach, you know, you'll never feel 100% fulfilled on all 4, but you'll have a good base.
Yeah.
If you want to be successful in one of them, you need to turn one of them off. And if you want to be hyper successful, you need to turn 2 of them off. So that's the thing, where it's like, you know, like eat those 4 plates represent family. Family. The other one I would say was, if I remember, was friends, friends and social life. The other one is health, and then the last one is career. So those are
Right.
the four ones, and the danger sometimes with running and being hyper successful on one is that you only have another one to lean on.
Right.
So in case of something happening or whatever, you are running a risk of saying, hey, can everything run on this one thing, you know?
Yeah.
So it's a balance. And I truly believe that throughout our lives, you turn it up and down, you try to find your balance within it. But I think that's essentially what I've done, is I've been able to say, like, okay, I'm turning some others back on, and I'm okay with this one going down a little bit. So
Yeah, definitely. I mean, one of the things I would probably say, or that I've kind of started to want to ask artists now, is that if 21-year-old Esben was standing in front of you, you know, looking back now about where you were back then, and you were standing in front of him, what would you tell him to make his life better? What do you think would be your key message to him,
um
knowing what you know now and having had the career you've had?
what would I say? Just have fun, and put on some dub effects. That's I like that seemed to work for 20-year-old me. It's just like
Yeah,
listening to music and then just like keep my head down, and
yeah,
I was loving it. Like, I was really loving it.
yeah.
um and I think that's it's an important part, because if we don't, like, I think that's coming back to the expectations and pressure too, because if you're not enjoying it, that's when it really becomes hard, and it's hard to kind of keep going. And it's so, if there's not aspects that you have fun with or enjoying, it starts to go sour. And if you do not have fun, at least if you have meaning, like
Yeah.
you know why you're doing it.
Mhm.
So I would say that that's maybe the main thing, is to try to have fun with it, you know. And
Mhm.
because it alleviates the pressure of what we want to have outcomes from it. So yeah.
Do you feel that there's meaning still behind your art? Do you feel like there's a reason you continue to be an artist? Is there still a love for it there?
Yeah, absolutely. Sometimes more than others, but at the core, it's still storytelling. It's still communicating emotions. I think it's an incredible skill. I think it's a skill to communicate feelings through pictures, and I love that. I still do. So I think now it's coming to a point where it's more like, hey, what do I want to communicate? It's not so much about learning the skills and everything, but it's more about
what do you want to
trying
say
to
as a
say
person?
something. Yeah.
Yeah. Is that a key for maybe like in the future there might be some kind of graphic novel or storytelling that you're doing on your own, or like is that something that you've thought about, like creating your own stories?
I would love to do a Kickstarter at one point. I have when I was 18, I lost my brother, and it happened very fast and everything. And I would love to create. I've already started. I've been sitting on this story for a long time, and I would love to wrap it up. I would love to finish it and make it into a Kickstarter at some point.
Cool.
And then see how it does. But essentially, it goes into how it is when you're dealing with grief and the 5 stages of grief, and hopefully it can help share a light on the experience of that, and then also help other people that might be in a similar situation relate and feel like they're not alone with it. So I hope it can do some good once it's done. But that's gonna be a behemoth, because it's going into a lot of heavy emotions and memories on my end too.
Yeah. Well, I'm sure wherever he is right now, I'm sure he's very proud of the man you've become and everything you've done with your life, Esben. So I'm sure that the fact that you're sharing his story, that will make him even prouder. So definitely a thing to look forward to. So I think it's a good place to end it. I think it's a good place to chip off, but let you get back to your work. But yeah, I mean, thanks to you guys who have stuck around this long. I hope for whatever you've been listening, it's helped in some way, that you guys have appreciated the talk. And again, thanks to Esben for coming on and talking. I hope you enjoyed it.
Yeah, for sure. And thank you, Gordon. I really appreciate it. Awesome conversation and questions and everything. I hope you keep doing this and keep pressuring, and and then maybe in a year or two we'll have another sync up. So
I would love that. Yeah, it's always great when guests come back and they want to do another episode. Definitely enjoy just sitting and chatting, about just life in general. Now I think, like you said, when I first started this, it was all about how to draw and how to do this and how to get jobs, but as I get older as well, I want to talk about other things, deeper things, within us. And I think it's really great that we can sit sometimes and just have a human conversation, because especially over the last 2 years, that's been something we've all been vastly missing. And I know I get emails from people, from students, who say that like the podcast is one thing that's basically keeping them going, because, I'm only one of like 4 podcasts or something. So like if I'm not doing it, it's one less, there's only 3. So yeah, I'm glad that I get to contribute in some way. So yeah. Again, thanks to Esben, thanks to you guys listening. Check us out on all the platforms. We'll be on many, Spotify, Google Podcasts, iTunes, we're all over the place. And on podcasts on YouTube as well. So we do the video version there as well. If you want to see Esben's pretty face and mine's as well, you can head over there and check us out. And that's really it, guys. Thanks again for listening, and we'll see you all there. Bye.